David gripped the steering wheel as his pulse raced. In the back seat, his twin boys, Caleb and Mason, slumbered in peaceful innocence, unaware that this journey would forever alter their lives. David's mind churned with desperate thoughts. Life had become unbearable, and in that moment, he convinced himself that leaving them in the forest was the only way out of his overwhelming despair. Driving into the heart of the woods, he clung to a fading hope that someone would come for them, a hope he later clung to as the memory of that night haunted him. Little did he know, fate had other plans. Years down the road, a surprising encounter at the community chief's residence would force him to confront the choices he made and the unforeseen bonds that held his family together. Welcome to Acts of Kindness Stories, a space where even the hardest decisions lead to lessons of resilience, love, and the possibility of new beginnings. David's heart pounded as he drove deeper into the woods, the weight of every lost opportunity and broken promise pressing upon him. In the back seat, his twin boys, Caleb with his deep warm complexion and Mason fair and gentle, slept unaware that the day would mark the turning point of their lives. In a moment of unbearable desperation fueled by eviction notices, mounting bills, and a fractured relationship with Lydia, David made the gut-wrenching decision to leave his children at a quiet, familiar campsite. He gently lifted each boy from the back seat and settled them on a worn picnic table beneath towering pines. Tucking a carefully prepared envelope between them, a note with his contact details for a long-forgotten aunt, David whispered promises of a better future, even as his tears betrayed the regret he refused to admit. At first light, as the forest awoke with subtle rustlings and the chorus of morning birds, Caleb stirred. The boys' sleepy eyes met the soft glow of dawn, and soon their innocent voices echoed, calling out, "Daddy!" Their small hands clutched each other as confusion gave way to mounting fear in the vast, unfamiliar wilderness. Before they could fully comprehend what was happening, an unexpected visitor approached. A dignified elderly man named Mr. Carter, whose calm presence and kind eyes conveyed both authority and deep-seated sorrow. With a measured tone and gentle invitation, Mr. Carter led the boys away from the lonely picnic table, offering them warmth and shelter in his nearby cabin, promising that they would soon be safe and cared for. As the weeks passed, life took a dramatic turn. David, haunted by his desperate choice, struggled to piece together a semblance of normalcy. Employed as a janitor at Carter Industries, a prestigious company helmed by none other than Mr. Carter himself, David found himself constantly surrounded by reminders of his shattered life. Every sweep of the cleaning cart down the polished corridors served as a harsh reminder of the family he had abandoned. Despite his quiet suffering, he clung to the hope that one day he might see his boys again and earn back their trust. That opportunity came sooner than he ever imagined. One late afternoon, as David dutifully attended to his tasks in the executive wing, he was called into Mr. Carter's office, a spacious room with imposing double doors and rich mahogany furnishings. Stepping inside, David's eyes fell upon a sight he could scarcely believe. Caleb and Mason sat quietly on a luxurious leather sofa, dressed in immaculate clothes and exuding an air of quiet confidence. The boys, now seemingly comfortable in their new surroundings, looked up at him with expressions that mingled shock, hope, and a restrained formality that belied their tender years. "Explain yourself." Mr. Carter's voice was firm, the tone of a man who had spent decades perfecting his every word. David's heart hammered as he struggled to articulate the pain and desperation that had driven him to such an unimaginable act. He stammered out an account of financial ruin, an eviction that left him homeless, and a heartbreak so deep that he believed abandoning them was the only way to protect them from a life of deprivation. Yet as he spoke, his voice cracked with sincerity and remorse. His words, raw and laden with emotion, spoke of love unmeasured by material wealth, a love that had driven him to make the most terrible mistake of his life. Mr. Carter listened, his gaze unflinching. When David finished, the elder's eyes hardened slightly. "Tell me," he demanded, "why did you choose that very campsite?" His inquiry was more than a question. It was an examination of David's character and the choices that had led to this fateful moment. Slowly, David recalled the serene clearing, the old picnic table that had once been a symbol of family gatherings during happier times, and the emergency phone that had promised a lifeline. It was a place he had known well, a place he thought was safe enough for his boys, even if only for a few precious hours. But as he recounted his rationale, he realized that every detail painted a picture of a man trapped by fear and despair, unable to see that his children deserved more than what his circumstances could ever provide. In a twist that David could barely process, Mr. Carter revealed a truth that shattered the remnants of his already fragile hope. The boys, despite being born mere minutes apart, were not genetic twins in the way he had assumed. Caleb was biologically his, while Mason was not, a result of a rare phenomenon known as superfetation. The clinical explanation was as cold as it was undeniable. While both boys had grown up side by side, only one carried the genetic imprint of his love and sacrifice. Mr. Carter's tone was clinical as he explained that Mason's biological father was a man named Daniel, a revelation that struck David with the force of a betrayal he had never anticipated. Yet, even as this truth hung heavily between them, David's love for both boys remained unaltered. "Biology doesn't define family," he insisted, his voice resolute despite the tears that threatened to spill. The conversation took an even deeper turn as Mr. Carter began to peel back layers of long-hidden family secrets. He recounted a tangled history that intertwined their lives, a narrative of lost opportunities, bitter family feuds, and a legacy of painful choices. He spoke of his own daughter, Nadia, whose short life had been marred by scandal and sorrow. Nadia, it turned out, had been involved in a tumultuous relationship that resulted in the birth of a child, a secret so guarded that it had fueled years of silent bitterness. The mysterious music box, an heirloom of immeasurable sentimental value that had once belonged to Nadia, was now in David's possession, a symbol of both loss and an unspoken promise of reconciliation. Mr. Carter explained that his relentless pursuit of the truth about Nadia and her life had been driven by a desire to reclaim something irretrievably lost, and in his search, he had found the boys, living proof of a past that could neither be undone nor ignored. As days turned into weeks, the sterile corridors of Carter Industries and the opulent halls of Mr. Carter's mansion became the stages for a relentless drama. At dinner, the atmosphere was charged with a tension that could not be easily dispelled. Over an elaborate meal set in a grand dining room, the boys recounted stories of their newfound privileges: horseback riding lessons, trips to the seaside, and the promise of an education that would open doors their father had never been able to reach. David sat at the edge of the table, listening intently, his heart a battlefield of conflicting emotions. Every smile, every proud anecdote shared by Caleb and Mason was a bittersweet reminder of the stability they now enjoyed, a stability that came at the cost of the family bonds David had once cherished. Yet, even amidst this cultivated opulence, the shadow of that fateful night in the forest loomed large. In hushed conversations with Mr. Carter, David was reminded again and again of the price of his desperate choice. The conversation veered toward the idea of loyalty and the responsibilities of parenthood. What kind of man abandons his children in the wilderness? Mr. Carter's words echoed in the spacious office, a challenge that David knew he had to answer not just with words, but with actions that could heal old wounds. In that moment, David vowed silently that he would prove to his sons, and perhaps even to himself, that love transcended the scars of the past. Yet the true test of his resolve came unexpectedly. One crisp afternoon, while the family gathered in the expansive gardens of the mansion, calamity struck. As the twins played near an ornamental pond, a sudden commotion erupted. Mason, caught in a moment of careless play, slipped into the water. The tranquil surface erupted into chaos as panic seized the onlookers. David's heart stopped as he saw his son flailing, his small hand reaching out desperately. Without a second thought, he plunged into the cold water, his arms cutting through the surface in a desperate bid to save Mason's life. Every second felt like an eternity as he administered CPR, his training coming to life in the midst of crisis. The garden was silent except for his urgent shouts for help, and the moment that Mason coughed and broke the surface, signaling that he was clinging to life, David felt a surge of relief mixed with profound grief for all that had been lost and all that might yet be regained. In the aftermath, as paramedics tended to the exhausted boy and the family gathered in the cool shadow of recovery, the true cost of that desperate night was laid bare. David's resolve hardened as he faced Mr. Carter once more. Now was the time to decide whether he would let this painful chapter define his future, or use it as the foundation upon which to rebuild his family. Conversations turned to legal arrangements and custody negotiations, discussions that carried the weight of history and the promise of new beginnings. Mr. Carter, with his decades of experience and the unyielding legacy of a family built on both wealth and bitter memories, made it clear that any future would come with conditions. David was offered an arrangement to remain a part of his sons' lives under strict guidelines, including a position at Carter Industries and residence in a modest guest house on the sprawling estate. In return, Mr. Carter would maintain significant control over the children's welfare, a proposal that left David wrestling with the knowledge that his freedom and dignity were now bartered for a chance at redemption. Amidst these negotiations, a subplot of lingering secrets began to emerge. A call from Vivian, a former confidant of Lydia and a woman whose own past was as tumultuous as the present, revealed more layers of betrayal and hidden motivations. Vivian, now transformed by years of struggle into a composed, determined professional, warned David about the manipulative designs of Mr. Carter. She explained that long before the fateful night in the forest, her own family had been entangled in a web of power struggles and unspoken resentments with Carter Industries. The revelations were stark. Surveillance on David, covert investigations into every decision he had made, and a long-standing feud rooted in unresolved grievances. Vivian's message was clear. If David wished to reclaim not only his sons but also a sense of personal honor, he had to challenge the controlling influence that Mr. Carter wielded over his family's destiny. As the days unfolded, every conversation, every quiet moment in the mansion's corridors, carried the echo of past choices and the promise of transformative change. David, now faced with the ultimate test of his character, began to understand that his journey was not solely about the guilt of abandonment, but about learning to forge a future based on love, accountability, and the unbreakable bonds of family. Even as Mr. Carter recounted more about the mysterious heirloom, a delicate music box that had once belonged to Nadia, whose legacy still resonated in every note it played, David found himself questioning whether the pursuit of legacy and revenge had ever truly served anyone's best interests. In the midst of these turbulent revelations, the message that began to take root was one of resilience and the enduring power of unconditional love. The narrative that had started with a desperate, heart-wrenching decision in the forest was now evolving into a testament to the transformative strength of redemption. David's voice, trembling with a mix of sorrow and newfound resolve, became the bridge between the fractured past and a hopeful, if uncertain, future. He knew that every mistake he had made was part of a larger tapestry, one that included not only loss and regret, but also the potential for growth, forgiveness, and the kind of second chances that could rebuild what had once seemed irretrievably broken. Throughout this journey, the lessons were profound and unmistakable. Family is defined not solely by biology but by the choices we make and the love we commit to giving every single day. Even as legal battles loomed and the weight of a manipulative legacy pressed down on him, David clung to the belief that nurturing a future built on honesty, accountability, and compassion could one day mend the deep scars of abandonment. The path ahead was steep and riddled with challenges, yet the promise of stability and true familial connection shone through every dark moment. In every whispered conversation, every tearful exchange with Caleb and Mason, and every heart-stopping moment of crisis, David began to see that the essence of true parenthood was not measured by perfection but by the courage to face one's mistakes head-on and the relentless drive to make things right. His journey, marked by loss and redemption, became a living lesson that even when life seems to have lost its way, love remains the most potent force for healing and change. And as the forest that had once borne witness to his most desperate act now stood as a silent guardian of his promise to rebuild, David realized that every hardship had the potential to pave the way for a brighter, more compassionate future for his boys. A future where every act of kindness could help mend a broken heart and restore the true meaning of family. As the days turned into weeks and the weeks into months, David, Caleb, and Mason began to rebuild the fragile bonds that had once seemed irreparably broken. The mansion's cold, Corridors gradually gave way to a home filled with small acts of tenderness, a shared laugh over a meal, quiet moments spent side by side in the garden, and evenings spent stargazing through a telescope that symbolized hope and endless possibility. David's journey was far from over. Every scar told a story of pain, and every smile carried the weight of hard-won lessons. But through the challenges and the quiet triumphs, one truth shone through. Family is not defined solely by the past or by blood, but by the choices we make every day. With each passing moment, David proved that true love means taking responsibility, confronting mistakes head-on, and always striving to do better for those we cherish most. In time, legal battles settled into gentle compromises, and the controlling shadows of Mr. Carter's legacy began to lift. David and Lydia, who had once walked away from a life of turmoil, found themselves united again by a commitment to create a stable, nurturing environment for Caleb and Mason. Their reunion wasn't a fairy tale ending. It was the result of continuous effort, honest conversation, and a shared desire to rewrite their future. The transformation was evident. The once desolate forest where a desperate decision was made now stood as a quiet witness to change, a place that reminded them of how far they had come and the resilience that had carried them through the darkest hours. In their new home, every act of kindness, every word of encouragement, and every lesson learned became a building block for a better tomorrow. Their story became a living lesson in the power of second chances, the strength found in vulnerability, and the enduring impact of unconditional love. Today, David stands as a symbol of redemption, a man who once felt defined by his mistakes but now finds his worth in the love he pours into his family. His message is clear. Even in the midst of overwhelming despair, there exists the potential for renewal and hope. By acknowledging his faults and accepting responsibility, he has forged a future where his sons not only survive but thrive, surrounded by the safety, stability, and warmth of a home rebuilt on trust. This isn't just a story about overcoming hardship. It's a testament to the fact that every act of kindness, no matter how small, has the power to transform lives. It shows that true strength lies in caring for those who depend on you, and that with perseverance and empathy, even the most broken pieces of a life can be mended together. If this story touched your heart and inspired you to believe in the power of compassion and second chances, please take a moment to like, share, and comment below. Your support not only helps us reach more people but also spreads a message of hope and resilience in a world that desperately needs it. And if you haven't already, subscribe to Acts of Kindness Stories. We're aiming for 10,000 subscribers, and with your help, we can continue sharing real-life narratives that educate, uplift, and remind us all that love is the strongest legacy we can leave behind. Thank you for being part of our community, and remember, every small act of kindness adds up to a brighter future for all of us.